Darius Webb was 41 years old, and until that Tuesday morning, he believed he had built something worth being proud of. A contracting business he'd grown from nothing over 15 years. A house he'd purchased at 27, renovated with his own hands, and paid off before 40. And a marriage of 11 years to a woman he had never once given reason to doubt. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He was the kind of man who showed up, did the work, and trusted the people closest to him completely. That morning, his surgeon cleared him for early discharge, 2 days ahead of schedule. He texted Angela. No answer. He called. Voicemail. He arranged his own ride home, the way he always arranged everything. When he turned onto his street, he saw Angela's car in the driveway. He also saw the truck belonging to the man he had hired, trained, and was quietly grooming to become his business partner. Darius walked through his own front door, and what he found upstairs in his own bedroom didn't break him. It activated something in him that neither of them had ever seen before, and they had no idea what they had just set in motion. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The forms were 3 pages long. Darius Webb read all 3. He always did. The nurse had already come back once to check on him, probably expecting him to be done by now, but he wasn't the kind of man who signed things he hadn't read. So he sat there in the thin hospital gown, back straight on the paper-covered exam table, and he read every line. His hands looked strange holding the clipboard. They always did in places like this. These were not paper and pen hands. The knuckles were thick. The skin at his fingertips was rough in a way that no amount of lotion had ever fully fixed. 15 years of wire, conduit, junction boxes, and crawl spaces had seen to that. But they were steady. They were always steady. He signed the last form, set the clipboard on the tray beside him, and reached for his phone. Troy had already confirmed. All 3 active job sites were covered. The Riverside commercial job was in good hands. Troy had been running crews long enough to handle 2 days without supervision. Darius had texted him the project notes anyway, because thoroughness wasn't about trust. It was about not leaving anything to chance. His insurance company had been notified at 7 that morning, before he even left the house. He had Angela's work number written on the intake form as the secondary contact, his mother Phyllis as the tertiary. The nurse had raised an eyebrow at that. You have 3 contacts listed, Mr. Webb, and he had simply nodded. Because yes, that was the correct number of contacts to have. He texted Angela his room number and settled in to wait. The room they gave him was on the 3rd floor, facing the parking structure. Not much of a view. He'd had worse. He thought about the house while the IV line dripped. Specifically, he thought about the kitchen. The way he'd rerun the entire electrical panel the first winter he owned the place, working weekends for 6 weeks, because the previous owner had left behind a mess of aluminum wiring that made him nervous every time he looked at it. He'd been 27 then. The house had cost him more than he had, which meant it had cost him years of before sunrise mornings and no vacations and driving a truck with 100,000 miles already on it, because new trucks were for men who hadn't committed their money to something real yet. He paid it off 11 years later, at 38. He remembered sitting at the kitchen table, the one he hadn't built yet, that came later, and looking at the payoff confirmation on his laptop screen. He hadn't called anyone. He'd just sat there for a while. Then he'd made dinner. That was the same year Angela started mentioning the Henley account, a couple she knew through her bank, who had just moved into a new build in Fairfield Heights. She brought them up 3 or 4 times over the course of a month. The neighborhood, the finishes, the husband's position at the regional office. They're doing really well, she'd said. Some people just know how to move. He hadn't said much. He was tired. He was always a little tired by dinner. Angela arrived at 6:42 that evening. He knew it was her before the door opened because he could hear her heels in the hall. that precise, unhurried click that she'd perfected over a decade of loan officer meetings and bank branch visits. She came in looking composed, hair done, lipstick fresh. She was carrying a small paper bag from the deli on Clement Street. She set it on his tray table and leaned in to kiss his cheek. She smelled like Chanel No. 5, the kind that came from a bottle, not a wrist that had been wearing it all day. He filed it away. He didn't mean to. He just did. "They said the surgery went well," she said, pulling the chair close to his bed. "You should have called me sooner. I didn't even know until you texted the room number." "I texted you when I was heading in," he said. "I was in a meeting." She opened the bag. Soup, still sealed, plastic spoon. "I came as soon as I could get away." He looked at the soup. He looked at her. He nodded and said thank you because she had come, and he was a fair man. They talked for 40 minutes. She asked the right questions. She squeezed his hand before she left, and he watched the door close behind her. And then he picked up the clipboard from the recovery nurse's afternoon notes and read those too. By morning, he could walk the hallway without stopping. By the afternoon of day 2, his numbers looked so clean that his doctor sat at the foot of the bed with an expression that was almost amused. "You could go home tomorrow," the doctor said. "Could even be today, if you've got someone to check on you." Darius picked up his phone. He texted Angela first. Nothing. He texted Troy. Nothing. He called Angela. Her voicemail picked up on the 3rd ring, which meant she'd heard it and let it go. He set the phone on the blanket and looked at the window for a moment. The parking structure was still there. The sky above it was flat and gray. He called the car service he used for client pickups, because he always did. The car service dropped him at the curb at 11:40. He paid through the app, added the usual tip, and stood on the sidewalk for a moment before looking up. Angela's silver Accord was in the driveway. That was fine. She sometimes worked from home on Tuesdays. But Troy's F-250 was parked behind it, nose to the street. Black truck, crew cab, cracked side mirror on the passenger door. Darius had told him about that mirror 3 weeks ago. Get that fixed before you're driving clients around. Troy had nodded and said, yeah, definitely. He'd take care of it. He hadn't taken care of it. Darius stood on the sidewalk and looked at that cracked mirror for a few seconds. Then he picked up his discharge bag and walked to the front door. He used his key. The house was quiet in that particular way. Not empty quiet, but occupied quiet. The kind of stillness that happens when people inside believe no one is coming. The TV wasn't on. The air smelled faintly like something had been cooked that morning. Eggs, maybe. And underneath that, something else. A cologne he recognized. He set his bag down by the door and stood in the front hallway. The sounds he heard were coming from upstairs. He walked to the staircase. His hand found the banister, solid oak, sanded and stained by his own hands the summer he and Angela moved in. He climbed the stairs slowly, not because he was trying to be quiet, but because he was 2 days out of surgery, and the discharge nurse had told him to take the stairs easy. He took them easy. The bedroom door was halfway open. He pushed it the rest of the way. He stood in the doorway. He saw. Angela screamed. It came out sharp and short, like something cut off at the source. Troy scrambled upright, tangled in the sheets Darius had picked out himself from a linen store on Madison Avenue 2 Christmases ago. Gray. 200 thread count. Angela had said they were too plain. He had said they were good quality. Darius said nothing. He stood there for what felt like a long time. Long enough for Troy to get to the edge of the bed. Long enough for Angela to pull the sheet up to her chin. Long enough for both of them to understand that he had seen everything there was to see. Then he turned around. He walked back down the oak banister stairs, through the front hallway, and into the kitchen. He took a glass from the cabinet over the sink. The cabinet he had leveled and mounted himself on a Saturday morning 6 years ago while Angela was at brunch. He filled the glass from the tap. He pulled out the chair at the head of the kitchen table. He sat down. The table was solid walnut. He'd built it himself from reclaimed wood 3 months after the wedding. It had taken him 4 weekends. Angela had complained that it was too heavy to move when she wanted to rearrange the room. He had told her it wasn't meant to be moved. He put both hands around the glass and waited. They came downstairs together, which told him something. Angela was crying. Not the loud, falling apart kind, but the leaking kind. Mascara tracking slow lines down both cheeks, eyes red and swollen. She was wearing his old college sweatshirt. Troy was dressed, mostly. He had his shoes in his hand. His face was doing something complicated, trying to find an arrangement of features that wasn't humiliating and failing at every angle. They were both talking before they reached the kitchen doorway. Angela said it wasn't what it looked like, which was something people said when it was exactly what it looked like. Then she said it had only been a few times, which contradicted the first thing. Then she said she was so sorry. She was so sorry. She didn't know how to explain it. She had been feeling so alone. Troy said, "Darius, man, look," and then stopped, because there was no sentence in the English language that followed those words and landed anywhere useful. Darius listened to all of it. He sat with his hands around his glass and his back straight, and his face arranged the way it was arranged when he was reading a contract. Neutral, attentive, processing. When they stopped talking, he looked at Troy. "Troy," he said. His voice was even, not low and threatening, just even. "Have your tools off my job sites by tomorrow morning. Don't make me ask twice." Troy opened his mouth, closed it. Darius looked at Angela. He looked at her for a long moment, at the sweatshirt, at the mascara, at the kitchen she had never once cooked a full meal in. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he is memorizing so he can make a decision about it later. "I just had surgery 2 days ago," he said. He stood up. He picked up his discharge bag from the hallway where he'd left it, took his medication from the front pocket, and swallowed it dry at the bottom of the stairs. Then he went to the guest room, closed the door, and lay down on top of the covers in the afternoon light. He did not sleep. He stared at the ceiling. He was already thinking. Troy's truck was gone by 6 in the morning. Darius knew because he heard it leave. He'd been awake since 4, lying on top of the guest room covers, listening to the house. He heard the front door open and close, heard the engine turn over, heard the tires pull away from the curb. Then silence. He lay there another hour before he got up. Angela was in the kitchen when he came downstairs. She had made coffee, real coffee, not the pod kind she usually made for herself. She had set out a mug for him. She was standing by the counter with both hands wrapped around her own mug, wearing the same sweatshirt, hair pulled back, eyes puffy from a night of crying or not sleeping or both. She started talking before he reached the bottom of the stairs. She said she knew there was nothing she could say. Then she said quite a lot. That it had started slowly, that she hadn't meant for it to go where it went, that she had been trying to tell him for months that something was wrong between them, but he was always working, always tired, always somewhere else even when he was sitting right in front of her. She said his name twice in the middle of it, the way people do when they want to make sure you're still listening. He poured himself coffee and sat down at the walnut table. He was still listening. She cycled through again. Sorry, then defensive, then sorry again. The defensiveness was the more honest part. He could hear it. The quiet argument underneath everything she was saying. The one that went, "You drove me here." He let her make it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't agree. He didn't react. He just filed it away. Every excuse was a piece of information. Every justification told him something about how she had organized this inside her own head. He was building a picture, and she was handing him the pieces without knowing it. When she finally went quiet, she looked at him like she was waiting for him to collapse or explode, or do something that would let her know what came next. He said, "Thank you for the coffee." Then he picked up his phone and went to the guest room. He called Victor at 8:15. Victor Ossie had been his attorney for 9 years, and his friend for longer than that. He answered on the second ring, which meant he was already at his desk. "Darius, I need to talk." He told Victor what had happened. He kept it clean. No extra weight, no commentary. Just the facts in the order they occurred. The surgery, the early discharge, the 2 vehicles in the driveway. What he saw when he opened the bedroom door. What he said. What they said. Victor listened without interrupting. When Darius finished, there was a short pause. "You want out?" Victor said. "Or you want even?" Darius looked at the ceiling of the guest room. The same ceiling he'd repainted 3 summers ago. 2 coats of warm white, because the previous color had bothered him every time he looked at it. "I want to know everything I don't know yet," he said. "Then I'll decide." "All right," Victor said. "Don't touch anything in the house. Don't move money. Don't have any more conversations with her about the marriage. You talk to me first." "Understood. I'll start pulling paperwork this afternoon." Darius thanked him and hung up. He called his mother at 8:45. Phyllis Webb picked up on the first ring the way she always did, and said his name the way she always said it. Both syllables, full weight. Then she went quiet. Not her usual quiet, a different kind. "Mama," he said, "how long did you know something was wrong?" The silence stretched. Then she said, "I saw that man's truck, in the neighborhood, twice, while you were at the sites." Her voice was careful, controlled in the way of someone holding something heavy. "I wasn't certain. I told myself I wasn't certain. But you thought it." "Yes. Just the one word, carrying all of it." "I understand," Darius said. And he did. He genuinely did. She had waited and made the wrong call, and she knew it. And there was nothing to gain from pressing the point. "Don't carry that, Mama. It's not yours to carry." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Are you all right?" "I'm working on it," he said. That evening, while Angela was upstairs, Darius opened the household finance accounts on his laptop. Angela had managed the accounts for most of the marriage. He had let her because she was a loan officer, and she was good with numbers, and because he had trusted her the way he trusted good wiring, completely, without checking it every day. He checked it now. It took him 40 minutes to find it. Small amounts. Transfers spaced out in irregular intervals. 200 here, 350 there, occasional jumps of 800. Moving steadily, quietly, over 14 months, from their joint savings into an account he had never seen before. An account with only her name on it. He ran the total 3 times. $22,400. He closed the laptop. He went to the kitchen and got the yellow legal pad he kept in the drawer by the refrigerator, the one he used for job notes and materials lists. He sat down at the walnut table, the one that wasn't meant to be moved, and he uncapped a pen. At the top of the first page, he wrote 3 lines. What I know. What I need to know. What it's going to cost her. Victor's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building downtown, the kind of building that had been there long enough to feel permanent. The waiting area smelled like old wood and fresh coffee. The receptionist knew Darius by name. Victor was already standing when Darius walked in. They shook hands the way men do when the pleasantries don't cover what's actually in the room. Victor was tall, trimly built, with close-cut gray at his temples that had arrived early and stayed. He wore a charcoal suit and no tie. His desk was clean in the way that meant he'd already pulled everything out and organized it somewhere else. He looked at the legal pad under Darius's arm. "Sit down," he said. Darius laid the legal pad on the desk. Victor read it without picking it up, leaning forward slightly, eyes moving in clean lines down the page. He asked 2 questions. Darius answered both. Then Victor opened a folder he had prepared the night before and walked Darius through it. Webb Electric was structured as a single-member LLC, registered in Darius's name alone, with Darius listed as the sole owner and operator. There was no joint interest. Angela had never been added. The business had been formed 4 years before the marriage, and nothing in the intervening 11 years had altered that structure. "She has no claim on the business," Victor said. Flat, certain. Not the name, not the contracts, not the equipment, none of it. Darius nodded once. "The house," Victor continued, sliding a property record across the desk. "You purchased it in your name alone at 27. No co-borrower. No title transfer during the marriage. Pre-marital asset. She's going to argue she contributed to the upkeep. She can argue it. It won't change the title. It might change the conversation around liquid assets. But your attorney—" Victor paused and gave him a dry look. "Your attorney is already accounting for that." A small thing, but Darius almost smiled. Victor tapped the legal pad. "The joint savings account is the arena. Whatever's in it, whatever came out of it, that's where this gets contested." He sat back. $22,000 moved into a personal account over 14 months is not something a judge looks at favorably. That's not someone preparing for a rainy day. That's someone preparing to leave. "That's what it is," Darius said. "I know. And we can document it." Victor paused. "I also want to run a quiet look at Troy's recent financial activity. New accounts? New business registrations? Anything filed in the last 6 to 12 months. You think he's been doing side work. I think a man who was willing to do what he did in your bedroom was willing to do other things too." Victor's voice stayed even. "I have a contact. He's discreet. It'll take a few days." Darius looked at him. "Do it." He was at the Riverside job site by 10:30. Modified duty meant no lifting, no climbing, no work that pulled at the 2 small incisions still healing under his shirt. It meant paperwork, walkthroughs, standing conversations with his crew instead of working beside them. He hated it. He did it anyway. He told them Troy was no longer with the company. No explanation, no story. Just the fact, delivered the way he delivered all facts, quietly, without room for debate. He watched their faces. Marcus, his senior electrician, gave a single slow nod and went back to pulling wire. No surprise in it. Kevin, who had been with Webb Electric for 3 years, glanced up and then quickly away. The look of a man who had known something was coming and was relieved it wasn't about him. Danny, the youngest on the crew, looked genuinely confused, started to ask a question, and thought better of it. 2 faces out of 7 showed no reaction at all. Darius filed that away. He spent the rest of the morning reviewing the site schedule, checking the materials order against the invoice, and walking the space twice with a clipboard. The work steadied him. It always had. There was a logic to electrical systems that felt honest. Every wire had a purpose, every connection had a consequence, and nothing stayed hidden for long if you knew what to look for. He drove home at 4. Angela had cooked dinner. Actually, cooked it. Not reheated. Not delivered. The kitchen smelled like the chicken and rice she used to make in the early years of the marriage. She had set the table. She looked up when he walked in with something careful and hopeful in her expression. He said it smelled good. He washed his hands, ate, and said very little. Later that evening, Angela went into the bedroom and called her sister, Renee. She kept her voice low, but the house was quiet enough that Darius, sitting at the walnut table with his laptop open, could hear the shape of the conversation, if not every word. He didn't try to hear it. He didn't need to. He heard Angela say, "I think he just needs time." Heard her say, "He hasn't asked me to leave." Heard something that sounded like maybe we can still. Then a longer silence. Renee talking. Then Angela's voice, smaller. "You don't know him like I do." Renee's response came through the phone loud enough that Darius heard it clearly without meaning to. "Angie, don't be a fool. Angela didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, quiet and certain, "It's not like that." She believed it completely. The report arrived on a Thursday. Victor sent it over in a sealed envelope by courier. No email. Darius picked it up at the office before his crew arrived. He sat in his truck in the parking lot with the engine off and read every page. It took 12 minutes. Troy Maddox had registered a limited liability company 4 months ago. He'd named it MTX Electrical Solutions. The registered address was a UPS store on Clement Avenue. The listed agent was a cousin, smart enough to obscure it, not smart enough to hide it completely. Victor's contact had pulled the new business filings, then cross-referenced them against commercial contract records that were, technically, public. What he found was laid out in clean columns with dates and dollar amounts. 3 commercial bids submitted under MTX Electrical Solutions. 2 of those bids were for jobs Darius had already quoted under Webb Electric. Troy had undercut both quotes by exactly 11%. Not a round number, not a guess. A deliberate calculation. The kind of number that comes from knowing the original bid. He knew the original bid because he had helped Darius prepare it. Darius turned to the 3rd page. 2 documented material discrepancies. In both cases, electrical supplies had been invoiced to Webb Electric's supplier account and then installed on MTX job sites. It wasn't a large amount, $1,200 total, spread across 2 orders over 6 weeks. Small enough to look like clerical error. Big enough, when documented, to look like exactly what it was. Darius sat with the papers in his lap and looked out through the windshield at the empty parking lot. 6 years. He had trained Troy himself. Taught him how to read a commercial electrical plan, how to manage a crew without losing their respect, how to talk to a client so the client trusted you. He had paid him better than anyone else in the industry would have. He had been, privately, thinking about a partnership conversation. Not this year, maybe next. He had been watching Troy, measuring him, believing he was seeing someone who was building something real. What he'd actually been watching was someone memorizing how to take it from him. He folded the report, put it back in the envelope, and went inside to start his day. He made the first call just after lunch, from his truck parked outside a sandwich shop on Meridian Street. Gerald Park had been running Greenfield Property Management for 19 years. He and Darius had worked together for 11 of them. Gerald was the kind of man who called back within the hour and always paid his invoices early. "Gerald, it's Darius. I've got a quick question for you and I'd appreciate a straight answer." "Always," Gerald said. "In the last 6 months, has anyone approached you with electrical bids outside of Webb Electric?" A beat of silence, longer than it needed to be. "Yeah," Gerald said. "About 3 months back. A guy named Maddox. Said he was independent now. Had his own operation." Another pause. "I didn't call you because I didn't want to create a problem that maybe wasn't a problem yet. I just told him we were locked in with Webb, and left it there." "I appreciate that, Gerald. I really do." Darius kept his voice even. "Can I ask you to put that in writing? Just a brief summary of the contact. Dates. What was discussed." Silence again. Shorter this time. "You going after him?" "I'm documenting what happened. Send me the address. I'll have something to you by end of day." Darius thanked him and ended the call. The second call went to Robert Ashby, Facilities Director for the County School District. Darius had wired 3 school buildings for Robert's department over the past 7 years. Robert was methodical, detail-oriented, and not a man who appreciated being played. The conversation was almost identical to the first one. Troy had approached Robert 2 months ago, offered a reduced rate on an upcoming HVAC integration project, mentioned that he'd been personally involved in similar district work before. "He said that?" Darius asked. "Word for word," Robert said. "I looked him up, didn't find much, and told him we'd stick with our current contractor. I need that in writing if you're willing. Already bothered me that he used our history as a selling point," Robert said. I'll write it up tonight. Back at the office, Darius opened the legal pad to a fresh page. He wrote a heading at the top in the same steady hand he used to label electrical schematics. Witnesses. Below it, 2 names, Gerald Park, Robert Ashby. Beside each name, a date and a short note. He set the pen down and looked at the page for a moment. Then he closed the pad, locked it in the bottom drawer of his desk, and finished out the workday. Angela had poured herself a glass of wine by the time he got home. She was sitting at the kitchen table, not eating, not on her phone, just sitting. She had the look of someone who had been rehearsing something all afternoon. He put his bag down, got a glass of water, sat across from her. She started talking. He let her. She said she had been unhappy for a long time, that she felt like she was invisible inside the life they'd built, that he came home tired, ate, slept, and did it all again. And somewhere in those years she had just stopped mattering to him, that she knew what she did was wrong, that she wasn't trying to excuse it, that she just needed him to understand that she hadn't meant to hurt him. The words came out carefully, the way words do when they've been arranged ahead of time. Darius listened to all of it. He didn't nod or shake his head. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, the kitchen was quiet. "Angela," he said. His voice was low and steady. "Tell me the truth about the savings account." The color left her face in a single, visible moment. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Darius held her gaze and waited. She stood up, took her wine glass, and walked out of the kitchen. The conversation was over. The call came in at 8:14 on a Friday morning. Darius was at his desk going over a materials invoice when his office line rang. He didn't recognize the number, but the area code was local. He picked up. "Webb Electric. This is Darius." A pause. Then a woman's voice, careful and controlled. "Mr. Webb, my name is Brenda Maddox. I'm—" A brief stop. "Troy's wife." Darius set the invoice down. "I heard he's no longer working for you. He told me it was a mutual decision, a parting of ways." She let that sit for a second. "I don't believe him." "I appreciate you calling," Darius said. "Can we meet?" Somewhere brief. They met that same afternoon at a coffee shop on Harwell Avenue, halfway between their respective sides of town. Brenda Maddox was a compact woman with careful eyes and the kind of stillness that comes from spending several days trying very hard not to fall apart. She had dressed neatly. She held her coffee cup with both hands. Darius sat across from her and got straight to it. "Troy was terminated for conduct violations," he said. "That's the official reason, and it's accurate." "What kind of conduct?" "I'm not in a position to go into specifics right now." She looked at him for a long moment. Her jaw was tight. "Was it just professional?" Darius held her gaze. He didn't answer the question. He didn't have to. Something moved across her face. Not surprise. Recognition. "Okay," she said quietly. She looked down at the table, then back up. "Okay." Darius slid a plain business card across the table. "Just his name and the office number. If you find anything you think I should know about," he said, "you can reach me there." She picked up the card, looked at it, put it in her jacket pocket. They finished their coffees. They shook hands at the door. The whole meeting had taken 19 minutes. 4 days later, an envelope arrived at the Webb Electric office. No return address. Inside were photographs, printed on plain paper, clear enough to read. Hotel receipts. 3 of them, spanning 8 months. All the same mid-range chain off Interstate 40. The name on each one was Troy Maddox. The dates of 2 of them lined up with evenings Darius could now place precisely. Nights Angela had mentioned working late. Behind the receipts were screenshots of credit card charges. Restaurant tabs for 2 on nights Troy had told Brenda he was pulling overtime. A jewelry purchase in February that Brenda had never seen any evidence of. The last item was a photograph of a cell phone, small, prepaid, the kind sold in a plastic package at a drugstore. Brenda had written on the back of the photo in neat handwriting, "Found in his work bag. Wiped clean. But I have the records from the packaging receipt." No note, no explanation, no ask. She didn't need to explain. She was doing what Darius was doing, documenting, building, protecting herself the only way a careful person knows how, by making sure the truth existed somewhere it couldn't be erased. Darius called Victor that afternoon. Victor had been working on both documents for over a week by then. He walked Darius through them at the office on a Tuesday evening after his paralegal had gone home. The first was the divorce filing. 31 pages. It named the $22,000 account as marital asset dissipation, supported by 14 months of transaction records. It detailed the date of discovery of the affair. It listed the property holdings clearly. The house in Darius's name, the business untouched. Victor had attached Brenda's hotel receipt photographs as supplementary documentation. "She's going to come out of this with her car and her clothes," Victor said. His voice wasn't unkind, it was just accurate. The second document was the business litigation. Tortious interference, theft of commercial opportunity, misappropriation of company materials. Victor had attached Gerald Park's written statement, Robert Ashby's written statement, and the material invoice discrepancies pulled from Webb Electric's supplier records. "I want to file both at the same time," Darius said. Victor nodded once. "Monday morning, same hour." He stacked both folders neatly on the corner of his desk. "Ready." Darius drove to his mother's house on Thursday evening. Phyllis had made coffee without being asked, which meant she already knew this wasn't a casual visit. He sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. All of it. The affair, the money, Troy's LLC, the stolen bids, the materials, Brenda's envelope, the 2 documents waiting in Victor's office. Phyllis didn't say a word through any of it. She sat with her hands folded around her own coffee cup, and she listened the way she'd always listened, completely, without performance, without rushing toward a response. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet. She looked at him for a long moment. "Tell me what you need me to do," she said. Darius nodded. "The October dinner," he said. "I need it to happen at your house. Same as every year." He paused. "And I need Angela there." Phyllis held his gaze. Her expression didn't change. She reached over and refilled his coffee cup. "She'll be there," she said. 3 weeks out from the surgery, Darius's body had done what it was built to do. The incision was healing clean. The soreness was mostly gone. He was sleeping through the night again and eating full meals without discomfort. His doctor had cleared him for normal activity at the 2-week mark and told him his numbers were excellent. Darius had thanked him, scheduled a follow-up, and gone straight to a job site. The body heals. That part was simple. Angela was not healing. She was unraveling. Not loudly. She was too practiced for that. But Darius could see it in the small things. The way she checked her phone, and then set it face down on the counter when he walked into a room. The way she'd started sleeping later, which she never used to do. The way she watched him sometimes from across the kitchen with an expression he recognized as fear dressed up as concern. She had tried twice more to have a conversation, a real one. Both times Darius had listened without engaging, answered only what required a direct answer, and moved on. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse her of anything. He simply withheld the one thing she needed most, a reaction she could work with. Silence, he had learned, was its own kind of pressure. It filled a room completely and left a guilty person nowhere to stand. She was trying to figure out what he knew. He could see her calculating behind her eyes. She didn't know about Victor. She didn't know about the filings. She didn't know about Brenda's envelope or the materials reports or the statements from Gerald Park and Robert Ashby. Every day she didn't know those things was another day Darius had that she didn't. He intended to use every one of them. It was a Wednesday evening when he pulled up the phone records. Their shared family plan was something they'd set up years ago and never touched. Same carrier, same account, same login he'd created himself and kept in a notebook in his desk drawer. He opened the account on his laptop at the kitchen table while Angela was upstairs. He wasn't expecting what he found. Or maybe he was. Maybe some part of him already knew and just needed the data to confirm it. The call history went back 18 months in the system. He didn't need all of it. He only needed to find the start. He scrolled back to 14 months ago, and there it was, clean and unmistakable. The way truth always is once you stop looking away from it. Troy's number appearing in Angela's outgoing calls twice, 3 times a week, then daily, then multiple times a day, with the calls getting longer as the weeks went on. He cross-referenced the dates against the bank transaction records he'd already printed and kept in a folder in his desk. First withdrawal, 14 months ago. Third week of the month. First cluster of daily calls to Troy, 14 months ago. Second week of the same month. He sat with that for a long moment. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Angela hadn't drifted into this. There was no drift, no gradual slide, no moment of weakness that snowballed into something she didn't plan. She had made a decision, a clear, deliberate decision, and then she had gone to work. She had started pulling money out of their shared life while she was still fully inside it, still sleeping in their bed, still bringing him store-bought soup at the hospital, still squeezing his hand, and asking the nurses how long his recovery would take. He thought about that night in the hospital, the soup, the perfume, the hand squeeze. He closed the laptop. The last trace of ambiguity, the small, stubborn part of him that had wanted to believe in accident, in weakness, in ordinary human failure, went quiet and did not come back. He called Victor from his truck at 7:42 that evening. "Move everything to ready," he said. "The family dinner is 10 days away." Victor didn't ask for an explanation. He'd been expecting the call. "Both filings are packaged and ready for simultaneous service," he said. "Monday morning, same hour. I'll coordinate the process server for Troy's address." "Good," Darius said. "You doing all right?" Darius looked out through the windshield at the driveway. The porch light was on. Angela's car sat beside his truck, same as it always had. "I'm fine," he said. "I'll talk to you before the dinner." He ended the call. The following days had a plain, steady rhythm to them. He worked. He ate. He spoke to Angela when something needed to be said. About a bill. About a delivery. About nothing that mattered. He showed her nothing. He felt the pressure of what was coming like a hand pressed flat against the inside of his chest. But it was a manageable pressure, the kind he knew how to carry. On Sunday evening he drove to Victor's office after hours. Victor met him at the door. He handed Darius 2 sealed envelopes, one for Angela, one assigned to the process server handling Troy. Darius drove home. He pulled into the driveway, set both envelopes in the glove compartment, and pressed it shut until it clicked. Then he went inside and ate dinner. Phyllis Webb's home smelled the same way it always had in October. Pot roast and cornbread. The particular warmth of a house where the oven had been running since noon. The faint scent of the orange and clove potpourri she kept in a bowl by the front door. The same bowl she'd had since Darius was 12 years old. Walking through that door always did something to his shoulders, made them drop about an inch. He arrived first, same as always, helped his mother carry the folding chairs up from the basement, set the table the way she liked it. Good plates, not the everyday ones, cloth napkins folded into triangles the way she'd taught him as a boy. His cousins Marcus and Deshawn came next, loud and easy, filling the front room with the comfortable noise of men who'd known each other their whole lives. Then Angela's sister, Renee. She hugged Darius at the door, held it a half-second longer than usual, and said nothing. Angela arrived 20 minutes later. She was composed. That was the word for it. Composed in the deliberate way of a woman who had spent time in front of a mirror deciding how to look. Her dress was pressed. Her earrings matched. She brought a sweet potato pie she'd made from scratch, which she set on the counter and announced with a small, careful smile. She kissed Phyllis on the cheek. Phyllis received it without expression and went back to the kitchen. Darius watched all of this from across the room. Angela found his eyes and held them for a moment. He gave her nothing. She looked away first. Dinner was exactly what it always was. The food was passed around the table and the conversation filled itself in the way family conversation does. Stories about work, complaints about traffic, Deshawn's ongoing, losing battle with his homeowners association. Marcus made everyone laugh twice. Renee complimented the cornbread. Angela ate and smiled, and contributed exactly the right number of words to exactly the right topics. She was performing. Darius recognized it because he was performing too. The difference was that he knew what came after. Phyllis refilled glasses without being asked and said little. She sat at the head of her table in the way she always did, upright, present, watching more than she talked. Her eyes moved around the room with the quiet attention of a woman who had been reading people for 67 years and had gotten very good at it. Darius ate his pot roast. He complimented his mother's gravy. He answered Marcus's question about the Riverside project with the patience he always brought to explaining his work. He was not in a hurry. He had not been in a hurry for weeks. When the plates were mostly clear and the table had settled into the comfortable slow down of people who had eaten well, Darius set his fork down and placed both hands flat on the tablecloth. "I need a few minutes," he said. "I want to say something to everybody here." The conversation stopped. The shift in the room was immediate. Not alarmed, but attentive. This was not how Darius usually talked. He was a man of few words in social settings, and when he asked for the floor, people gave it to him. He did not stand long before he spoke. "3 weeks ago I came home from the hospital early," he said. "My discharge was quicker than expected. I texted Angela that morning to let her know. She didn't respond." His voice was level. No drama in it. He spoke the way he'd speak on a job site explaining a problem in the electrical plan, clearly, with the facts in order. "When I got home, Troy Maddox's truck was in my driveway. I went inside and I found them together. In my bedroom." The table went still. Renee set her fork down on her plate with a soft, precise click. "After that, I started looking at things I hadn't looked at before." Darius kept his eyes moving, not avoiding anyone, not targeting anyone, just speaking to the room. "Angela managed our household accounts. I trusted that. Over the past 14 months, $22,000 was moved out of our joint savings in small amounts into a personal account that didn't have my name on it." Angela's chin lifted slightly. Her mouth opened. Darius continued. "I pulled our phone records. Troy and Angela's calls started 14 months ago. The same month the first withdrawal happened. Not close to the same time. The same month. Same weeks." He paused for exactly 1 beat. "That wasn't an accident. That was a plan." He looked at Angela then, directly and without heat. "Troy also spent the last 4 months registering a competing business and using client relationships I'd built to go after my commercial contracts. 2 of my longtime clients confirmed it. I have their statements." Angela said, "Darius," and her voice came out thinner than she intended. "I'm almost done," he said, quietly and without unkindness. He reached beside his chair and brought up a manila folder. He set it on the table in the open space between the plates. "Victor is serving you Monday morning," he said. "I wanted you to hear it from me first." He sat back down. He poured himself sweet tea from the pitcher by his elbow. He took a sip and set the glass down and did not say anything else. The room stayed quiet. Angela looked at the folder, then at her sister. Renee was looking at the table. Phyllis had not moved, had not blinked, had not shifted her gaze from Angela's face since Darius began speaking. Angela opened her mouth. The words she had been rehearsing, the version of events she had shaped and smoothed and lived inside of for weeks, arranged themselves at the back of her throat. And then she looked around the table, at Renee, who would not meet her eyes, at Marcus and Deshawn, who had both gone very still, at Phyllis, whose expression held no anger and no sympathy, only the calm certainty of a woman who had already known. The rehearsed words stayed where they were. There was no one in this room willing to receive them. Monday came in gray and cold, the kind of October morning that felt like a warning. Victor Osi did not send a courier. He went himself. He was parked outside the Webb house by 9 in the morning, coffee in a thermos, the sealed envelope on the passenger seat. He watched Angela's car in the driveway. He gave her until 9:15. Then he walked to the door and knocked. Angela answered in a robe. Her face, when she saw who it was, did something complicated. Her eyes dropped to the envelope in his hand, and whatever she had been hoping, that Monday would arrive like any other Monday, left her completely. "Angela Webb," Victor said. His voice was courteous and entirely empty of warmth. "These are for you." She took the envelope. She didn't say anything. Victor nodded once, turned, and walked back to his car. Across town, a second process server Victor had engaged was climbing the front steps of the address Troy Maddox had been renting since the previous week. He knocked twice. Troy came to the door in yesterday's clothes, unshaven, looking like a man who had not slept well in 10 days. He took the envelope, read the return address on the header page, read the words Webb Electric LLC-V, Maddox and the phrases beneath them: tortious interference, theft of commercial opportunity, misappropriation of business assets. His phone was in his hand before the process server reached the street. The call came into Victor's cell at 9:47. Troy's voice was tight, controlled, but only barely. "I need to talk to Darius." "Darius isn't available," Victor said. He was already back at his office, jacket hung on the door, reading glasses on. "You've been served through proper legal channels. Any communication about the matter goes through me. This is—" Troy stopped, recalibrated. "This is a misunderstanding. I can explain the LLC. I was going to talk to him about it. There was never a formal agreement that said I couldn't. Mr. Maddox." Victor's voice didn't rise. It just became more precise, the way a scalpel is more precise than a knife. "I have signed statements from 2 of your former contacts confirming that you solicited their business while employed by Webb Electric, using professional relationships Mr. Webb built and introduced you to. I have invoice records showing materials billed to Webb Electric accounts that were used on jobs contracted under your LLC. Those aren't misunderstandings. Those are exhibits." A brief pause. "My advice to you, and I'm offering it once, as a courtesy, is to retain counsel before we speak again." The line went quiet for a moment. "He set me up," Troy said. It came out almost like he believed it. "He documented you," Victor said. "There's a difference." He ended the call. Angela called Renee at 10 o'clock. Renee picked up on the 3rd ring. "He had Victor serve me this morning." Angela's voice was held together, but just barely, like a seam about to split. "At my own front door, in my robe." "I know," Renee said. "I need—" Angela stopped, started again. "I don't even know what I need. Can you come over?" There was a pause on the line. Not a long one, but long enough to be felt. "Angie!" Renee's voice was steady and honest in the way of someone who loves you enough to refuse to lie to you. "I sat at that table on Saturday, and I listened to everything he said. The money, the timeline, all of it." Another pause. "I'm not going to tell you he's wrong. I'm not asking you to. You're asking me to come over and make you feel better about this. And I love you. You know I love you, but I can't do that." Renee exhaled slowly. "You made your choices, Angie. Now you live in them." The line stayed open. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "I'll check on you Thursday," Renee said. "I mean that." The call ended. Angela stood in the kitchen of the house she had been living in like a guest for 3 weeks. The envelope was on the counter. The sweet potato pie she had brought to Phyllis's, the gesture she had been so careful about, sat half-eaten on the shelf above it. She did not call anyone else. On Wednesday, Brenda Maddox filed for divorce. She had retained her own attorney the previous week. The filing was clean and thoroughly documented. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, photographs of the second phone, call logs pulled from a shared plan she'd had the presence of mind to screenshot before Troy could think to modify anything. She had not needed Darius to tell her how. She was a detail-oriented woman who had been suspecting the worst for months, quietly and without saying so to anyone. When the confirmation came, she had simply gotten to work. Troy received her filing on Thursday morning. He was already carrying the divorce papers from Angela's side of the building. He was already carrying Victor's litigation. He had no income, terminated from Webb Electric, with a side LLC that had no real clients left, no real contracts, and no real foundation beyond the name and relationships of the man he had spent 6 years pretending to respect. He sat at his kitchen table that Thursday afternoon and spread the papers out in front of him. 3 separate things, 3 separate directions, all arriving at the same time. He thought about Darius, standing at the hospital, texting from a recovery room. Always the first one to a job site, always the last one to raise his voice. He had read that quietness as weakness for 6 years. He had been wrong about every single thing. The judge signed the final settlement order on a Tuesday in February, 4 months after the dinner at Phyllis's house. Darius wasn't in the courtroom when it happened. Victor called him while he was pulling wire on a commercial job in the east quarter of town. Darius listened, said, "All right," thanked Victor, put his phone back in his chest pocket, and finished the run. The settlement itself was what the evidence demanded. Angela's $22,000 withdrawal had been documented down to the last transfer. Dates, amounts, the account number she had thought was invisible. The court classified it as marital asset dissipation. That word, dissipation, was a legal term, but it fit in other ways too. 14 months of small, careful moves that dissolved something real into something she could carry away. The classification cost her substantially in the final division. What remained of the joint assets was split accordingly. She kept her car, her personal belongings, and a number that was considerably smaller than what she had planned for when she opened that private account. The house went to Darius. So did the business. Neither had ever truly been in question. The legal structure Darius had built over 15 years turned out to be as solid as everything else he'd built. Victor had told him that at the very first meeting. He'd been right. Troy's reckoning came in pieces, and each piece was quieter and worse than the one before it. The LLC didn't survive the litigation. The judgment against him covered documented damages, the materials invoiced to Webb Electric, the quantified value of the client's solicitations, the business opportunity that had been diverted. Troy had no real assets to absorb it. The LLC had been built on borrowed credibility and stolen access, not capital or competence, and when the legal pressure hit, there was nothing solid underneath it to hold. The property management firm dropped him before the judgment was even final. The facilities manager from the school district sent a 1-paragraph letter to Troy's attorney, making clear they would not be renewing any association. Both of them gave willing statements for Darius's case. Neither one had enjoyed being approached behind Darius Webb's back, and neither one had forgotten it. Word moved through the local trades the way word always moves in a small professional world, fast and low to the ground. A man who had run side jobs using another contractor's client relationships and billed materials to accounts he didn't own, that was the kind of story that traveled. In that industry, Reputation was the only real currency. Troy's was gone. Not damaged. Gone. He left the trades entirely by spring. Darius heard this secondhand from a supplier who mentioned it without drama, the way you mention weather. He did not feel satisfaction when he heard it. He didn't feel much of anything. The work had already been done. Darius sold the house in March, not because he had to. He could have stayed. It was paid off, the title was clear, and he had renovated every room in it with his own hands. But those rooms held a particular kind of quiet now, the kind that wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet of something that used to be full. He sold it to a young couple. First home. The husband had that look Darius recognized, a man who was about to find out what it actually takes to maintain something old. Darius gave him 20 minutes at the closing, unprompted, walking him through the electrical panel, the updated plumbing in the guest bath, the way the back door swelled in humid weather. The man wrote it all down. The new place was smaller. East side of town, 8 minutes from Phyllis, with a detached garage in the back that he converted into a workshop before he'd finished unpacking the house itself. He put in proper lighting first, then ventilation, then a workbench along the full back wall, level to within 1/8 of an inch. He built furniture on weekends. A side table first, then a set of shelves, then a dining table in white oak that took him 6 weeks and came out exactly right. Petra Gaines started as foreman in January, and she had come with references from 2 contractors in adjacent counties, both of whom had called Darius back unprompted to say she was the kind of person who made a crew better just by showing up on time. She had no agenda beyond doing the work correctly. She asked good questions in the first week and fewer questions after that, because she paid attention. By April, Webb Electric had signed 3 new commercial contracts, including one that Troy had attempted to poach 8 months earlier. The client had called Darius directly to initiate it. Revenue by the end of the second quarter was the highest the company had ever posted. Darius reviewed the numbers on a Thursday afternoon, alone in the office, the way he always did. He didn't say anything to anyone. He closed the folder and went back to the estimate he'd been working on. Phyllis came for dinner on Sundays. She brought food she didn't need to bring. His refrigerator was never empty, but she brought it anyway, because that was how she said things she didn't put into words. They ate. They talked about the crew, about the neighborhood, about a documentary she'd watched and found irritating. They did not talk about Angela. They did not talk about Troy. There was nothing left to say about either of them. He was seeing someone. A woman named Claire, who taught high school chemistry and had strong opinions about coffee and very little patience for pretense. It was early. Neither of them was in a hurry. They had dinner on Friday nights and sometimes took long drives without a destination and talked the way people talk when they're not trying to impress each other anymore. On a Saturday in late April, Darius was in the workshop past 9 at night, sanding a tabletop in long, even strokes. White oak again. A commission this time. Phyllis had mentioned the table to a neighbor without meaning to, and the neighbor had asked, and Darius had quoted a fair price and a 6-week lead time. The belt sander was loud enough that he felt his phone buzz before he heard it. He switched the machine off. A text from Gerald Fitch, a facilities director he'd worked with for a decade. Got a referral for you. Big commercial project. New hospital wing. East Campus. They want to talk to someone they can trust. Gave them your name. You interested? Darius read it once. He set the phone face down on the corner of the workbench. He picked up the sandpaper. He kept working. He wasn't in a hurry. He had built everything once. He would build it better this time. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.